In order to select a point precisely using AutoCAD, you need to use Object Snap. So you'll see Object Snap on the status toggle here. So here we have this Object Snap icon, and if you can't find this Object Snap icon, then click on this customization and turn on 2D Object Snap. Once turned on, when you select any object, any drawing object, and move your cursor close to any other geometry which is already present in your drawing, AutoCAD will attract cursor towards that point. So in this case, you can see that a tooltip with endpoint indicates that simply means that right now, even if you click at a certain distance from that endpoint, AutoCAD will snap that line to exactly that endpoint, which we can see here. So now you can directly make a line, and you don't need to worry whether your line is exactly snapping to that point or not. Now let's go and turn this Object Snap off, and let's try to make a line that exactly fit at the intersection point of these two lines, and let's try to be as precise as possible. And now press enter. So in this case we have used Object Snap, but in this case Object Snap was not used. So let's zoom in. So when you zoom in, you'll find that this is exactly ending at the intersection of these two lines, or at the end point of any of these lines which we have selected. But when you move your cursor to this one, and when you zoom in further, you'll see that we are not exactly snapping it at the correct point. So this was the correct point, but it is not snapping. So in order to snap it to exact point, you need to keep Object Snap turned on. So let's zoom out and erase the geometry. So object snaps are of many types, and to find out which type of object snap we are tracking to, or which we are snapping to, you can click on this small icon. When you do so, you'll see menu with plenty of snapping points, and there are some snapping points which are turned on, indicated by this tick mark, and there are some snapping points which are not turned on. So right now endpoint, midpoint and center is turned on. That simply means that you can now snap to the end point of a line, midpoint of a line, and to a center of a circle or an arc. Let's check these three values. So when you click on a line, and when you move your cursor to the end point of this object, which is obviously a line, it should snap, but Object Snap should be turned on. So let's turn it on and move our cursor now. So now you can clearly say that it is snapping to the end point of this line. So what about this line? When you move it close to this line, yes, it's snapping to this line. We've also seen that the midpoint snap is turned on. So here we have this line from this endpoint to this endpoint. Let's try to move a cursor close to the midpoint. So when you move close enough to the midpoint, a midpoint snap also appears. So that means you can snap it to the midpoint as well. Now let's look for some circular objects, and here we have a circular object, this circle. So when you move your cursor close enough to this circle, you'll see that a center snap appears. So even though my cursor is at the periphery or at the circumference of this circle, a center snap appears. And now if you click, your circle, your line directly snaps to the actual center, which is quite far from the circle. You can repeat the same process for other small circular objects also. For example, in this case we have a circle. Now if you bring your cursor close to the center, you'll see this center snap appears. So when you click, it will snap exactly to the center point of that circle. In AutoCAD 2016, we have a new feature with Object Snap, and that is geometrical center. So when you click on this button, which is adjacent to this Object Snap, then you'll see this geometrical center option. Turn it on, and now when you try to make an object and drag it towards the center, which is the geometrical center obviously for any of these objects, then it will snap to that point as well. So here you can see the geometrical center for this rectangle, and if you move it close enough to this polygon, which is a hexagon, you'll see its geometrical center as well. So with AutoCAD 2016, you can snap to the geometrical center of these geometries as well. Now let's look at some of the other points which are indicated in this Object Snap. Now the next point is node, which is point. So in order to snap to a point object, you need to turn node on. So let's type POINT for point and press enter, and let's make some points. So here we have a point. You might see point in a different way in your AutoCAD geometry. So you can type P type on your command line, press enter and change the point type from this. Right now point type of this is selected in my case, so in your case it must be this default. You can change it to any other point type. Let's say that we have selected this one. Now if you move your cursor close enough to that point, it should snap to that point. If on object snap this node is turned on, otherwise it won't snap to that point. Let's turn quadrant on and now move our cursor close enough. So when you move your cursor close enough, you will see that it's snapping to the quadrant, another quadrant, third quadrant and fourth quadrant. So in this way you can snap to the quadrants using that quadrant as well. There are some intersection points also in this drawing. So in order to snap to those intersection points, you need to make sure that intersection is turned on. For example, in this case we have these two lines intersecting at this point. So let's go to this snap menu and turn off midpoint, and let's turn on intersection, which is already turned on. Now let's select line and move your cursor close enough to this, and when you do so you'll see that intersection is indicated, and now it's exactly snapping to the intersection point of these two lines. It can be a line or a circle or the intersection of line and circle or any other two geometries. There are other options as well in this object snap that I encourage you to explore on your own.